There's a photo floating around the internet, and the first time most people see it, they assume it's fake. It shows an old animatronic, half submerged in black, algae-covered water, staring blankly into the darkness. No expression, no movement, just sitting there, decaying. It looks like a still frame from a horror film, something you'd find in an abandoned asylum or a condemned building. But here's what makes this genuinely unsettling. That photo wasn't taken in some forgotten ghost town. It wasn't taken in a closed-off wing of a condemned building. It wasn't taken in some horror filmmaker's prop closet. It was taken inside Walt Disney World, inside Magic Kingdom. One of the most visited, most photographed, most cheerful places on Earth. And while millions of guests were eating Mickey-shaped ice cream bars just a few hundred feet away, this was sitting underwater, in the dark, for nearly a decade. This is the story of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, the Disney attraction that literally sank beneath the surface, and the bizarre reason no one could pull it back up. Part 1. The world falls in love with submarines. To understand why this ride ever existed in the first place, the story has to start in a very different era, the late 1950s. The Cold War is at full tension. Submarines are the most mysterious, most powerful machines in the world. These steel giants could vanish beneath the ocean for months at a time, silently crossing the globe without a single soul on the surface knowing where they were. Most Americans had never seen one in person, which meant they felt almost mythical, powerful, unknowable, deeply fascinating. And Walt Disney, a man who built entire worlds out of fascination, saw an opportunity. In 1959, Disneyland unveiled a brand new attraction as part of a massive Tomorrowland expansion. It opened alongside the Matterhorn bobsleds and the Disneyland monorail, and it was called Submarine Voyage. Guests boarded bright yellow submarines, real physical vessels constructed at a shipyard in nearby Florida, and slowly appeared to descend beneath the surface of a massive lagoon. Through round porthole windows, they watched coral reefs drift past. They saw divers, sea creatures, shipwrecks, and glowing underwater caves. The secret? Pure Disney illusion. The submarines never dove very deep at all. They traveled along a hidden underwater rail, just below the surface, while carefully choreographed bubbles and lighting created the overwhelming sensation of plunging into the deep ocean. For audiences in 1959, it was nothing short of extraordinary. The ride became one of Disneyland's signature experiences almost immediately. And when Disney began planning Walt Disney World in Florida, the question was never if a submarine ride would be included. The question was, how much bigger can we make it? Part 2. Building an ocean inside a theme park. The Florida version wasn't going to be some modest update. Disney's Imagineers dreamed enormous. Instead of a generic underwater adventure, the ride would be themed around the legendary Jules Verne novel, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and Disney's own 1954 live-action film adaptation. Guests wouldn't just ride through a generic ocean. They would board Captain Nemo's Nautilus itself. The scale of what Disney built is genuinely staggering. A 4-acre lagoon was excavated and filled with over 11.5 million gallons of water. 12 submarines were custom designed. Their hulls constructed at Morgan Yacht in Clearwater, Florida, finished at Tampa Ship, and then transported to Walt Disney World on flatbed trucks. Each sub carried 38 guests plus a cast member captain. The submarines were so realistic that when you combine the fleet at Magic Kingdom with those at Disneyland, Disney briefly held the 5th largest naval fleet in the world. That's not a joke. The Walt Disney Company, a cartoon studio, technically had a bigger fleet than most sovereign nations. The attraction opened on October 14, 1971, 2 weeks after Magic Kingdom itself opened, due to last-minute infrastructure issues with the lagoon. And when guests finally boarded, what they found was extraordinary. The boarding experience alone was immersive. Guests descended a narrow spiral staircase down into the submarine. The hatch sealed above them. The engines hummed. The lights dimmed. And then, hundreds of air bubbles rushed past the portholes as the submarine appeared to dive. Once below, the journey unfolded in carefully constructed scenes. Colorful coral reefs, strange glowing creatures in dark underwater caves, animatronic divers and replicas of Harper-Goff-designed deep-sea equipment, the sunken ruins of the lost city of Atlantis, surrounded by crumbling statues. And near the end, a giant squid, attacking the Nautilus, in the dark. For the early 1970s, this was unlike anything most families had ever seen. It covered almost a quarter of all of Fantasyland. It was, without question, one of the park's most iconic e-ticket attractions, reserved for Disney's absolute best experiences. But underneath all of that magic, a serious problem was already forming. Part 3. The hidden cost of running an ocean. Running 11.5 million gallons of water inside a theme park is not a passive task. It demands constant filtration, constant chemical treatment, round-the-clock monitoring. And the lagoon itself was only part of the problem. Every single prop and animatronic on the attraction sat submerged, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Saltwater, algae, mineral buildup, and constant corrosion attacked everything underwater. Maintenance divers had to enter the lagoon regularly just to repair equipment that guests would never even know existed. The submarines were no simpler. Unlike most theme park ride vehicles, these weren't passive cars on a track. They had functioning diesel-powered systems. That meant mechanical failures were frequent. Air conditioning systems inside the cramped, humid cabins broke down constantly. Guests sometimes reported small leaks inside the vehicles. And then, there was the boarding problem. Each passenger had to carefully climb down a narrow staircase into the submarine. That was slow. It meant fewer guests per hour. It meant longer lines. It meant 20 cast members required just to operate the attraction each day, one of the highest staffing requirements of any ride at Disney World. Adjusted for inflation, the ride cost millions of dollars annually just to keep its lights on. Now here's where it gets fascinating. Disney knew most of this from almost the very beginning, and yet, the ride ran for over 20 years because guests loved it. But by the early 1990s, love wasn't enough to offset the math. The attraction was aging. New rides like Star Tours and Splash Mountain had raised the bar for theme park technology. Now, guests were starting to notice the cracks. Wires were visible on animatronics. Some props clearly rested on the lagoon floor. Occasionally, guests even spotted maintenance divers working during the ride itself. 4 acres of prime Magic Kingdom real estate, astronomical operating costs, outdated effects, slow guest capacity. For Disney executives, the decision had become unavoidable. Part 4. The Silent Sinking. On September 5, 1994, Disney announced the ride would close, temporarily, for refurbishment. That sounded completely normal. Disney closes things for refurbishment all the time. The official messaging suggested improved effects, a fresh update. Guests assumed it would reopen soon. But weeks passed, then months. The submarine sat parked along the track. The lagoon stayed full of water. No construction crew appeared. No visible work took place. Occasionally, Disney suggested the attraction might reopen in 1996. Then 1996 came and went. Quietly, with almost no announcement, Disney confirmed the attraction was permanently closed in 1996. No ceremony, no farewell event, no official acknowledgement of what had been lost. And then something truly strange happened. Disney didn't demolish it. They just left it. For years, nearly a decade, the lagoon sat exactly where it was. 11.5 million gallons of water, still holding an entire underwater world underneath its surface. Submarines were moved out of guest view, but the lagoon itself remained. Guests walking through Fantasyland could see parts of it from certain angles. If someone looked carefully at the water, the old ride track was still visible beneath the surface. Thousands of people walked past it every day, most of them completely unaware that they were looking at an abandoned attraction, still full of animatronics and set pieces slowly decaying in the dark below. The corner near the old lagoon was gently rethemed as Ariel's Grotto, where guests could meet Ariel beside a King Triton water statue. A small splash pad appeared nearby. A snack kiosk opened. On the surface, everything looked cheerful and intentional. Below it, a forgotten ocean. Part 5. When the water disappeared. Finally, in 2004, Disney decided it was time. The lagoon was drained, and what workers found when the water disappeared was genuinely haunting. The entire underwater world had been preserved almost exactly as it was left, over 9 years earlier. The Atlantis ruins still stood in place. Animatronics sat in the same positions they'd been left in when the final sub made its last run. Sea serpents rested motionless in dark chambers. Algae and sediment had settled over everything. One photograph taken during demolition became the image that resurfaces online every few years and unsettles everyone who sees it for the first time. A giant sea serpent animatronic, half submerged in dark, murky water, staring out from the shadows, algae coating its surface, lights long dead. For nearly a decade, this was sitting underwater, not in some abandoned park, right here, in Magic Kingdom, while families above bought balloons and posed for photos with Mickey Mouse. Honestly, does that not fascinate you as much as it fascinates me? Drop a comment below. Because people are genuinely divided on this. Was leaving it like that poetic, or was it just irresponsible? I want to see your take. Demolition crews eventually cleared the sets. The lagoon was filled with dirt, paved over, and with time, the footprint was absorbed into the ongoing life of the park. Part 6. Where the submarines ended up. After the ride's closure, the fleet of submarines was moved to the so-called Disney Boneyard, the backstage storage area where retired vehicles slowly deteriorate. Most of them were eventually scrapped. Several were reportedly buried in a plot of land on Disney property, which means pieces of those submarines are still underground somewhere inside Walt Disney World right now. But a few survived. 3 submarines were saved from demolition. One spent years on display on the backlot tour at Disney's Hollywood Studios. Its current whereabouts remain officially a mystery after that tour closed for Star Wars: Galaxy's Edge construction. 2 submarines were shipped to Disney's private island in the Bahamas, Castaway Cay, and deliberately sunk in the snorkeling lagoon. Starting around the year 2000, Disney Cruise Line guests snorkeling off Castaway Cay could swim directly over the old Nautilus vessels resting on the ocean floor. One was eventually damaged by hurricanes and removed, but at the time of this writing, one submarine still rests beneath the waters at Castaway Cay, waiting to be discovered by unsuspecting snorkelers who have no idea they're floating over a piece of Magic Kingdom history. The ride sank. And then, in its own strange way, it returned to the sea. If you've ever snorkeled at Castaway Cay and swum over that submarine without knowing what it was, say so in the comments, because that might be one of the most quietly poetic things Disney has ever done, and almost no one knows about it. Part 7. What stands there now? Back at Magic Kingdom, the former ride site sat undeveloped for years after demolition. Concepts came and went. A volcano-themed roller coaster called Fire Mountain, a Little Mermaid attraction, various expansions that never moved forward. Eventually, Disney announced a massive new Fantasyland expansion. The old submarine lagoon space was absorbed into the development. Today, where that 4-acre underwater world once sat, guests now find Seven Dwarfs Mine Train and Under the Sea, Journey of the Little Mermaid. There is almost no physical trace that 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea ever existed, except for one quiet detail. During the opening of New Fantasyland in 2012, Disney held a small ceremony. Water from the original 20,000 Leagues Lagoon was poured into the new waterways of the expanded Fantasyland, a quiet, almost private tribute to the attraction it replaced. Most guests who were there that day had no idea what they were witnessing. Agree or disagree? Was this enough of a tribute? Or should Disney have done more to honor one of Magic Kingdom's most ambitious original attractions? There's no middle ground here. Tell me in the comments. There's something about this story that sticks with people in a way that's hard to explain. Maybe it's the image of that sea serpent in the dark water, an entire lost world sitting forgotten beneath the surface of the happiest place on Earth. Maybe it's the fact that Disney, an empire built on the idea of magic, quietly abandoned something so massive, so beloved, so ambitious, and just walked away from it. Without a ceremony, without a farewell, without so much as a sign. Or maybe it's something simpler. The idea that right now, today, somewhere beneath the grounds of Walt Disney World, pieces of those submarines are still buried, slowly becoming part of the Earth, waiting. Some things sink, some things stay, And sometimes, if you snorkel off the coast of a private island in the Bahamas, you can still find one of them, resting on the ocean floor. Just like Captain Nemo always wanted. If this story got to you, hit that like button. It genuinely helps this channel more than most people realize. And subscribe if you want more stories like this, the kind of history that doesn't make the brochures. Until next time. Thanks for watching. If you want to go deeper into forgotten theme park history, the next video is right there. And I promise it's just as strange.